The purpose of this video is to show how to build 3 simple, practical hot wire cutters for cutting surfboard blanks. Cutters for rocker, outline, and rail curves will be shown. A Variac is needed. Despite the majority of videos on YouTube claiming a good cutter can be made using cheaper power supplies, this has proved false. You are wasting your time and money if you try to build a cutter with no Variac. This is a miniature of the large rocker cutter seen previously. It was made small so the components can be more easily seen. It's cut from 1/2-inch plywood as all the frames were. This dimension is minimum. Cutting smaller causes excessive flex. This dimension is critical to good spring tension. This is a 15-foot extension cord, 16 gauge. Pan framer screw, 7 by 7/16. Number 10 flat washer. 7/16 by 3 and 11/16 inch spring, 1 3/4 eye bolt with nuts and washers, 2-inch alligator clip, 18 gauge nichrome wire. This is an outline cutter. Leave at least 1 inch of space between the sliding plate and the nichrome wire. 1 1/8 drywall screw. 7/16 by 2-inch spring. This was cut from a larger spring. This is a rail cutter. 832 by 1-inch bolt. Cut the inner opening at least 1/16 inch larger than the thickest part of your rail. Assembly of the rocker cutter. After cutting your frame, install the eye bolts. Drill the eye bolt holes slightly undersized. This is 11/64, and screw in the eye bolts using your drill as far as it'll go. Put the washers and nuts on the underside only and leave a minimum of 1/2 inch clearance between the eye bolts and the inside of the frame. Install the second eye bolt about 9 inches from the first. Install eye bolt number 3 as you did number 1 and cut excess from all eye bolts flush with the nut. Measure a length of 18 gauge nichrome wire from eye bolt 1 to eye bolt 3 and add at least 3 inches to it. Use a short piece of 18 gauge nichrome wire to practice on. So grab it about 1.5 inches from the end and form a loop. And then grab the loop and bend it around twice. Put it through eye bolt number 1. The loop is where your spring will attach. Put the opposite end of the wire through eye bolt number 3 and pull out all the slack until the loop that's at eye bolt number 1 is touching eye bolt number 1. Bend it over. You can use your pliers. Twist it around twice. Should look something like this. Clip one end of the spring about 1/8 of an inch and bend the other side out slightly. This way it'll fit over the loop and the end of the eye bolt. Use a needle nose pliers to connect it to the eye bolt. If you don't have needle nose pliers, use a cord. When you get the tension correct, it'll make a dull sound like a loose guitar string. Separate the two wires in the extension cord about 3.5 feet and offset it from the center about 6 inches to the side that it's going to be plugged in on so that it won't be in your way. Arrange the wire so that it goes about 1 inch past the eye bolts, and it'll be connected inside of eye bolt 1 and 3. The two wire ends need to be stripped and the alligator clips crimped on. So strip off about 1 inch from each wire end and twist the loose strands. Fold them over. Force them into the alligator clip hole. Use crimpers. 16 designates our wire size. Crimp in 3 places. Twice to the plastic over the metal and once to the plastic over the wire insulation. Squeeze very hard. If loose, use a new clip. Crimping over an existing crimp weakens the crimp. These 1.25" alligator clips are cheaper and they're easier to crimp. In fact, you don't have to have crimpers to crimp them. You can crimp them with almost any kind of plier. So insert your stripped and twisted wire. And squeeze very hard. These work great. I haven't had any trouble with them. These pin framer screws and washers are better than the staples. This is because you can move them. It's impossible to short out the wire and you won't be pounding your finger. Leave the spring unattached when you're not using it or you'll warp the plywood. Although no switch is shown in the 3 hot wire cutters, you should be using a Variac, and the Variac will have a power switch on it. This should be within reach. If you insist on working with no switch nearby, I recommend that you cut the wire very short and mount the male end of the plug permanently to the plywood. This was done with a short piece of extension cord and the same screws you used before. This way you have one hand for the hot wire cutter and one hand to connect and disconnect the plug. Notice that the alligator clips are connected to the straight section of nichrome wire inside the bolts. Do not connect to the twisted part. This is true on all 3 hot wire cutters. Jacob's online for the number 18 nichrome wire and circuit specialists for the Variac. It's about $65 shipped. The assembly of the outline cutter is similar to the rocker cutter with the following exceptions. The plate needs to be at 90 degrees to the frame and to the wire. So drill the plate with a 9/64 inch bit and the frame with a 3/32 inch bit and screw in a 1 inch drywall screw. Check for 90. If it's off a little bit, just drill the next hole at a slight angle and pull it over to 90 degrees. Drill the two eye bolts at 90 degrees to the plate, and if the wire is off a bit, twist the eye bolts in different directions. That'll move the wire. Sand the top of the plate, and remember the spring needs to be stretched at least twice its unstretched length. These edges and corners need to be rounded off and the 3 holes countersunk. Assembly of the rail cutter. Notice that 832 by 1 inch bolts and number 10 flat washers are used. Drill the 3 holes with an 8/32 inch bit and screw the bolts in from the bottom side. Notice that the wire can be formed to any shape of rail, and the opening cut to fit. Allow at least a 1/2 inch between the holes and the opening. Bend the wire up slightly with your needle nose pliers to make room for your alligator clip. The number 18 nichrome wire goes between the washer and the nut at all 3 bolts. The wire and the alligator clips do not touch the wood. When forming the wire, start at the top loop. The black template material seen earlier is 30-pound roofing felt. 1¼ inch coarse thread screw, 1/2 inch masking tape. Much cheaper and easier than masonite. When using your Variac the first time, make sure it's set to 0. Get some scrap foam, turn it on, turn it up about 5 volts, wait. You'll probably notice it's not even humming yet. It should start to hum right in there if you've got one like this. See it starting to cut. Most people are using 26 gauge wire. This is 18. 26 wire breaks way too easily. It's too small and it's not made for this cutter. For each gauge wire and each length of wire, you need a different voltage. It's another reason why a Variac is essential. This cutter requires 20 volts max, the outline cutter 7 volts, the rail cutter 12 volts. Also, with each change in foam density, foam width, and cutting speed, a different voltage is needed. Before this video, over 20 different designs were tested, including transformer with dimmer, car charger, car battery, 120 volts with light bulbs in series, 8 wire sizes cutting 6 foam densities. Get a Variac.